Every day life's happening. Some days are more eventful. Others, living protected with insurance you can depend on changes your life for the better. We insure the people and things you care about. Not Agency. We'll help you find the right coverage so when life happens, you have the right insurance protection for your family and business. When life happens, live protected. Agency for all your insurance needs.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Tuesday, the 4th of July. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and happy 4th of July, Larry Brown.
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, singer, songwriter, storyteller, Larry Brown. And what better guest to have on the 4th of July than Larry, because you have a 4th of July story for us.
4th of July story.
Yeah. Does this include the typical 4th of July?
Well, why don't you decide if it's typical when we're done?
All right.
Okay.
So here
we'll
we
have
have
some
it.
time to talk.
Let me do the introduction.
Okay.
Here's Larry Brown. We're not sure if it's a typical or an anti-typical 4th of July story for you.
The two old men died after twists and turns in their life on the same day. Well, John was 90, Tom was 83, and they had been friends and enemies that had been shifts and changes throughout their lives. Now, folks who knew them would have described them as a rather odd couple. I mean, John was short and pale and pudgy and balding, and Tom was tall and handsome and red-haired. But when they died, they were separated by hundreds of miles and not knowing that each other had died at the same time. But the 14 years before their death, they had been corresponding. They'd retired to separate, independent places of living in different locations, but they wrote letters, 158 letters. Now, John wrote twice as many as Tom did, and John was a bit more emotional. Although both were writing about their past and the present times, John focused more on the relationship and seemed to be more heartwarming, whereas Tom was a bit more philosophical and analytical, but they'd corresponded. Now, those 14 years of correspondence, you have to know that had ended an 11-year silence. 11-year silent antagonism. It was only because a friend had worked for nearly 2 years to bring them back to talk to each other again. And finally, Tom broke the ice with a letter on New Year's Day. Well, those 11 years of silence were due to animosities that had occurred. Well, they were different personalities, but they were different cultures, and they certainly had different political attitudes. John was an urban northerner, and he had a kind of a continental sophistication about him, one might say. Whereas Tom, even though he was a southern aristocrat, he had the common people in mind. John was very much for a strong central government, but Tom said, I don't trust strong central governments. It might take away from what he believed would be the populism, the rule of the people. Well, they debated and argued, but it was when they were running for the same political office that really ended their friendship for that 11 years. It was a nasty campaign. Tom had accused John of not even being a man. And John, on the other hand, had accused Tom of being too much of a man, sexually involved and having relationships that were inappropriate. Well, prior to that, they had debated. They had worked both in elected and appointed political offices. In fact, 10 years after they first met, they were serving for the same governmental administration, and they'd both been assigned to Europe. And there they had become good friends and maintained their contact while in Europe. Their wives had become good friends, although John always favored Great Britain and Tom always favored France. It was when they were called together in Philadelphia. That's when they first met. They were called to represent their regions in the crafting of a very direct political statement, a statement of protest. Now, Tom was the more eloquent of writing, and John Well, he was the debater. In fact, he was very skilled at debating, and their two skills had worked complementary with each other to bring everybody at the table. And that document they drafted, well, we call it the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. And John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, they were at that time collegial in being founding fathers of the United States of America and its basic principles. But you see, they were in competition with each other after that, and it was for the office of president they ran that had the nasty campaign. Now, one can look back and say they were both friends and enemies. In fact, someone even referred to them as frenemies because of that relationship that ebbed and flowed. They were both invited, however, to be present for the 50th anniversary of the 4th of July, and both had to decline because of ill health. And this is what's remarkable. Both of them died on the 50th anniversary, the 4th of July, 1826, within 5 hours of each other, neither one of them knowing that the other had died. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, founding frenemies.
Oh, that's good. And this is a true story.
That is all true. Mm-hmm. Exactly. There was another president that also died on the 4th of July. Not that 4th of July, but Madison also died on the 4th of July.
But that's a really interesting story, Larry. You did a lot of research for that.
Well, it's out there. Other people have written books and told stories, but this is the day we recognize the important contribution, but so significant, both of them on the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, on the 4th of July. Yeah. Well, I would say that was a pretty good 4th of July story for us today.
So that fit with the 4th of July.
That fit. That was just absolutely perfect. A little bit of history in there, too.
Oh, sure.
Well, do you, and I don't know if this is a fair question, but how did fireworks become associated with celebrating the 4th of July?
Well, I don't know all of the in-depth probably understanding of that, but they are certainly representative of warfare. I mean, it's the bombs bursting in air that always symbolized it. But we also would shoot off weapons in celebration of the end of conflicts. Mm-hmm. Here you were in the midst of conflict with explosions, but then often, the shooting of guns.
That's
and the firing of
why
words.
also on New Year's Eve at midnight, you hear explosions. And I remember as a kid, New Year's Eve, but my dad had a shotgun, and that's one of the few times he used that shotgun. We'd go out at midnight and shoot the shotgun off to celebrate, bring in the new year.
And I would like to think perhaps we had to use weapons in the time of conflict, and now there's no conflict, so we can, in a sense, waste them. Now it doesn't matter, so perhaps.
I like that. Larry Brown, thank you so much. If people want more information, you coming performing for them, telling stories, how do they get in touch with you?
Contact me at brownstory@hotmail.com.
brownstory@hotmail.com.
Or take a look at my website too, brownstory.com.
Okay. Larry Brown, always a pleasure to have you here. If you're going to be out driving on the 4th of July today, be careful, and happy 4th of July to you.
Be friends.
Be friends and be nice.